My husband poured a full glass of red wine over my head at his company's biggest celebration, calling me a gold digger in front of 300 people. He had no idea I owned the company that was about to sign his $800 million deal. What happened next? Well, let me tell you about the sweetest revenge a woman could ever serve cold. I'm Stephanie, and this is my story about the night my marriage died and my power was born. Before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button right now. These real-life revenge stories don't tell themselves, and I've got plenty more where this came from. Give this video a like if you believe in karma, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love knowing there are people all over the world who understand that sometimes justice needs a little help. Now, let's get back to the night that changed everything. The ballroom of the Westwood Grand Hotel sparkled like something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across marble floors, and the Dallas skyline glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows. I stood near the back, wearing a simple black dress, elegant but understated, watching my husband, Richard, bask in the spotlight at the center of the room. He looked magnificent, I'll admit that. At 45, Richard still had that commanding presence that had first attracted me 15 years ago. His tailored Tom Ford suit fit him perfectly, and his dark hair, just starting to gray at the temples, made him look distinguished. He was smiling that megawatt smile he reserved for important people, shaking hands with investors, laughing at jokes from executives. This was his night. His architecture firm, Morrison Design Collective, had just landed the opportunity of a lifetime, an $800 million contract to design and oversee a massive urban development project. The contract was with Apex Holdings, one of the most prestigious development companies in the country. What Richard didn't know, what nobody in that room knew except my lawyer, was that I owned Apex Holdings. Through a trust, through shell companies, through layers of legal structures that had taken me 5 years to build. My maiden name was Montgomery. Sarah Montgomery was listed as the CEO of Apex. Sarah was my middle name, one I'd stopped using the day I married Richard, and became Stephanie Morrison. I'd built my empire in the shadows while playing the role of dutiful wife. Every investment, every acquisition, every brilliant business decision had been made while Richard assumed I was just managing our household finances and attending charity luncheons. I watched him now, surrounded by admirers, and felt nothing. No love, no anger, just a cool calculation that had become my constant companion over the past 3 years since I discovered his affair. The affair. God, even thinking about it made my stomach twist. I'd found out in the most cliché way possible, his phone buzzing with a text message while he was in the shower. Last night was amazing. I can't wait to see you again. Love you, babe. Her name was Jessica, 28, ambitious, one of the junior architects at his firm. I'd met her at company parties, smiled at her, made small talk, never suspecting that she was sleeping with my husband in hotel rooms on his business trips. But I didn't confront him. I didn't scream or cry or throw things. Instead, I hired a private investigator. I documented everything, and I started building my escape plan, one that would ensure I'd never be vulnerable again. Stephanie. Richard's voice cut through my thoughts. He was beckoning me over, his smile tight. I could see the irritation in his eyes, even from across the room. He didn't like that I wasn't standing beside him, playing the supportive wife. I made my way through the crowd, aware of the eyes following me. I'd always been attractive, auburn hair, green eyes, the kind of figure that turned heads, but I'd learned long ago that beauty was just another tool. Richard had married me for my looks and family connections. I'd married him for love. What a fool I'd been. There you are, he said as I reached him, his hand gripping my elbow just a bit too tightly. I was beginning to think you'd left. I'm here, I said softly. Just didn't want to crowd your moment. He introduced me to the men standing around him, executives from Apex Holdings, or so they thought. They were actually representatives, managers who ran the day-to-day operations. The real power, the real owner, was standing right in front of them in a black dress and pearls. Your husband is about to make history, one of them said to me, his smile patronizing. This contract will change everything. I'm sure it will, I replied, returning his smile. Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and I saw his expression change, that particular softness that only appeared when Jessica texted. My stomach churned, but I kept my face perfectly composed. Excuse me for just a moment, he said, already moving away toward the hallway. I knew where he was going. I'd had my investigator track his patterns. Jessica was probably outside in the garden, waiting for him. Even on his biggest night, he couldn't resist sneaking away for a moment with her. I followed at a distance, my heart pounding not with hurt anymore, but with anticipation. This was it. This was the moment I'd been planning for. Through the French doors, I could see them in the garden. The decorative lights cast shadows across their faces as they kissed, his hands in her hair, her body pressed against his. They looked like lovers in a movie, passionate and reckless. I pulled out my phone and took several photos. Not for evidence, I already had mountains of that. No, these were for me. Reminders of why what I was about to do was justified. When Richard came back inside 15 minutes later, his tie slightly askew, lipstick smudged on his collar, I was waiting in the hallway. Working hard? I asked, my voice soft. He had the grace to look startled. Stephanie, I was just taking a call. Of course you were. I reached up and wiped the lipstick from his collar with my thumb. You might want to fix your tie before you go back in. Wouldn't want people to get the wrong impression. His jaw tightened. Don't start, Stephanie. Not tonight. Start what? I asked innocently. I'm just trying to help you look presentable for your big moment. He grabbed my wrist, his grip painful. I'm warning you. Don't ruin this for me. I looked down at his hand on my wrist, then back up at his face. You're hurting me, Richard. He released me immediately, looking around to make sure no one had seen. Just stay out of the way tonight. Okay. This is important. More important than your wife? I asked. My wife would understand that this contract represents years of work, he snapped. But then again, you've never understood what I do, have you? You've never understood the pressure, the sacrifice, the skill it takes to operate at my level. There it was. The contempt he'd been hiding for years, finally surfacing. In his mind, I was just an accessory. A beautiful woman who looked good on his arm but couldn't possibly comprehend the complex world of his business. You're right, I said quietly. I don't understand your world at all. He nodded, satisfied, and straightened his tie. Good. Now come on. They're about to start the signing ceremony. I followed him back into the ballroom, my heart steady, my mind clear. The crowd had gathered around a raised platform where a mahogany table had been set up, contracts laid out in neat folders, cameras positioned to capture the historic moment. Richard took his place at the table, flanked by the Apex representatives. The master of ceremonies, a silver-haired man with a booming voice, called for everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to witness a momentous occasion. Morrison Design Collective, under the brilliant leadership of Richard Morrison, is about to sign the largest contract in the company's history. I stood at the edge of the crowd, watching Richard's face glow with pride and ambition. This was everything he'd ever wanted: recognition, wealth, status, power. My phone vibrated, a text from my lawyer. Documents are ready. Awaiting your signal. I looked at Richard one more time, remembering the man I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. Young, passionate, full of dreams. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost himself. Or maybe I'd just finally seen who he really was. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. I typed back, execute, and then I waited for Richard's world to fall apart. Richard had just picked up the platinum pen when his phone rang. Not a polite vibration, but a loud, insistent ring that cut through the ceremonial silence. He frowned, glanced at the screen, and I saw the color drain from his face. I need to take this, he muttered to the Apex representatives, already stepping away from the table. The master of ceremonies looked confused. The crowd murmured with uncertainty. I watched Richard's expression change as he listened to whoever was on the other end. Confusion became disbelief. Disbelief became panic. His free hand ran through his perfect hair, messing it up for the first time that evening. He looked around the room frantically, his eyes finally landing on me. For just a moment, our gazes locked, and I saw the question forming in his mind. But no, there was no way quiet, submissive Stephanie could have anything to do with whatever crisis was unfolding. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the Apex representatives stepped forward, his phone pressed to his ear. I apologize, but there seems to be an issue with the contract. We need a brief delay. Brief delay. That's what they were calling it. I knew better. I knew exactly what was happening. Richard stormed over to me, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward a quiet corner. Did you know about this? He hissed. Know about what? I asked, my voice perfectly calm. Something's wrong with the contract. They're saying there's been an error, that the approval didn't go through properly. His eyes were wild now, desperate. This can't be happening. Not tonight. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding, I said softly. These things happen with big contracts, don't they? He wasn't listening. He was already on his phone, frantically calling someone. I could hear his voice rising with each unanswered call. Come on. Come on. Pick up. Around us, the crowd had started to fragment. Some people were checking their phones, others whispering in tight groups. The cameras that had been positioned to capture Richard's triumph were now capturing his unraveling. Jessica appeared at his side, her hand on his arm, her face full of concern. Richard, what's happening? He shook her off. Not now, Jessica. But Jessica wasn't used to being dismissed. I'm just trying to help. I said not now. He snapped, loud enough that several people turned to look. I saw Jessica's face flush with humiliation. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered all the nights Richard had come home late, smelling of her perfume, lying to my face with a smile. My phone buzzed. Another text from my lawyer. Phase 2 initiated. Press release going out now. I excused myself quietly and stepped out onto the terrace. The night air was cool against my skin, and the city lights stretched out below like fallen stars. I opened my news app and refreshed. The headline appeared almost instantly. Apex Holdings CEO announces company restructuring. Multiple contracts under review. The article was carefully worded, legally airtight, and devastating. It mentioned that due to unforeseen circumstances and compliance issues, several pending contracts, including the Morrison Design Collective Agreement, would need to undergo additional review. Timeline: indefinite. I heard a commotion from inside and turned to see Richard burst through the French doors, his face crimson, his perfect composure completely shattered. They're canceling, he said, his voice breaking. They're actually canceling. $800 million, Stephanie. Everything I've worked for. I'm so sorry, I said. And part of me meant it. Not sorry for what I'd done, but sorry that it had come to this. Sorry that the man I'd loved had become someone I needed to destroy to save myself. Sorry? His laugh was bitter, harsh. You have no idea what this means. The firm took out massive loans in anticipation of this contract. We hired staff, bought equipment, made commitments. Without this money, he trailed off, the implications too terrible to voice. What will you do? I asked softly. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something shift in his eyes. Desperation, calculation, and then something darker, blame. This is your fault, he said quietly. I blinked. Excuse me. You. Standing there, jinxing everything with your presence. His voice was rising again, and people were starting to drift toward the terrace, drawn by the sound of conflict. I told you to stay out of the way. I told you this was important. But you couldn't just be supportive, could you? I stared at him, genuinely shocked by the mental gymnastics required to make this my fault. Richard, I didn't. You've never supported me, he shouted. Never. You've been a weight around my neck for years, spending my money, enjoying the lifestyle I built, contributing nothing. The crowd had gathered now, drawn like moths to flame. I could see Jessica among them, her eyes wide. The Apex representatives, the investors, the cameras. Richard, I said quietly, you should calm down. Calm down. He laughed wildly. My entire company is about to collapse, and you want me to calm down? You've lived off me for 15 years, Stephanie. 15 years of taking everything I earned, everything I built, and what have you given me in return? Nothing. You're nothing but a gold-digging leech. The words hung in the air, sharp and cruel. I felt every eye in that room on me, waiting to see how I would react. The humiliated wife, publicly shamed by her husband at his moment of crisis. And then Richard did something I'll never forget. He picked up his glass of red wine, the same wine we'd toasted with earlier, and threw it at me. The liquid hit my face in a cold, shocking burst. It splashed across my black dress, ran down my neck, dripped onto the marble floor. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone's camera flashed, capturing the moment for posterity. Maybe that will remind you of your place, Richard said, his voice like ice. I stood there, wine dripping from my hair, and felt something inside me crystallize into diamond-hard certainty. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, even if I hadn't known it until now. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a handkerchief, slowly wiping my face. The crowd was silent, watching, waiting. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady, clear, carrying across the terrace. My place. I repeated softly. You want to talk about my place, Richard? He was breathing hard, already starting to realize he'd gone too far, but too proud to back down. Yes, your place. Which is standing behind me, supporting me. Not. I am Apex Holdings, I said. The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples of confusion across the crowd. Richard frowned. What are you talking about? Apex Holdings, I repeated, louder now. The company that was going to sign your $800 million contract. I own it. Sarah Montgomery, that's my middle name and maiden name combined. I am the CEO. I am the one who built this company over the past 5 years while you assumed I was just shopping and having lunch with friends. I watched the information process across his face. Confusion, disbelief, and then finally horror. That's impossible, he whispered. Is it? I pulled out my phone and opened my email. Here's the corporate charter. Here are the articles of incorporation. Here's the trust documentation showing my ownership of 73% of Apex Holdings shares. I held the phone up so the cameras could catch it. Would you like me to go on? Richard was shaking his head slowly, like he could deny reality through sheer force of will. No. No. You couldn't have. You don't have that kind of money. You don't have the knowledge. You don't. I didn't have your knowledge, I corrected. I had my own. My father was a real estate developer, remember? Before he died, he taught me everything about this business. You just assumed I'd forgotten it all because I played the role of devoted wife so well. Jessica pushed through the crowd, her face pale. Richard, is she telling the truth? I looked at her directly for the first time. Yes, Jessica, I am. And before you ask, yes, I know about you too. I've known for 3 years. I have photos, text messages, hotel receipts. I've documented everything. The crowd had grown completely silent now. Even the traffic noise from the street below seemed to have faded away. Richard's voice was barely a whisper. Why? Why did I build a company? I asked. Or why am I canceling your contract? Both. I stepped closer to him. Close enough that only he could hear my next words. I built the company because I knew one day you'd leave me for someone younger, prettier, more exciting. I knew I needed to be able to survive without you. And I'm canceling your contract because you just threw wine in my face and called me a gold-digging leech in front of 300 people. I stepped back, my voice rising again for the crowd. The contract with Morrison Design Collective is officially terminated. Apex Holdings will be pursuing other partnerships. You can't do this, Richard said desperately. The firm will collapse. All those people who work for me worked for you. I corrected. Past tense. And yes, I can do this. I just did. I turned to the Apex representatives, who were watching with expressions of shock and growing understanding. Gentlemen, please prepare the official termination documents. We'll want this handled through proper legal channels. They nodded, already pulling out their phones. Richard grabbed my arm, his grip painful. Stephanie, please. We can talk about this. I was upset. I said things I didn't mean. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. Let go of me, Richard. He didn't. You're my wife. Not for much longer, I said quietly. My lawyer will be contacting you tomorrow with divorce papers. Given your very public infidelity and the documented abuse I've just experienced, I don't think you'll contest the terms. Abuse? He looked genuinely confused. I never. You just threw wine in my face and called me a leech in front of hundreds of witnesses, I said. Multiple cameras caught it. How do you think that's going to play out? His hand finally dropped from my arm. He stood there, swaying slightly, looking like a man who'd just watched his entire world collapse in the span of 10 minutes. Because that's exactly what had happened. I turned to leave, then paused. One more thing needed to be said. For what it's worth, Richard, I did love you once. Very much. But you chose Jessica. You chose your ambition. You chose your ego. You just never realized that the quiet little wife you dismissed so easily was the one holding all the cards. I walked away then, my head high, wine still dripping from my dress. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, and I could feel their eyes on me not with pity anymore, but with something closer to awe. Behind me, I heard Richard's voice, broken and pleading. Stephanie, wait, please. We can fix this. We can. But I was already gone. And his world? His world was burning. I drove home that night in silence, the city lights blurring past my windshield like tears I refused to shed. My dress was ruined, stiff with dried wine, but I didn't care. I felt lighter than I had in years. Like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't even know was there until it was finally gone. When I walked into our house, my house, legally, since I'd quietly bought it through a trust 3 years ago, the silence felt different. Not oppressive anymore. Peaceful. I poured myself a glass of water, stood at the kitchen counter where I'd made thousands of meals for a man who'd never appreciated any of them, and allowed myself a small smile. My phone buzzed. Text messages flooded in from numbers I didn't recognize. Friend requests on social media. DMs from reporters. Someone had already uploaded videos of the confrontation, and they were going viral. Number 1 revenge was trending, but there was one message I'd been waiting for. From my lawyer, Patricia Chen, divorce papers ready to file first thing Monday morning. Given tonight's events, and our documentation of his infidelity, I'd say we're looking at a very favorable settlement. I texted back, good. Make sure he understands what's at stake. You see, here's what Richard didn't know. What nobody knew except Patricia and me. When I'd discovered his affair 3 years ago, I'd started protecting assets immediately. The house? Mine. Purchased through a trust with my inheritance money. The vacation property in Aspen? Also mine. The investment portfolio I'd been managing for both of us? Every penny of it was legally in my name only. Richard had been so focused on building his company that he'd let me handle all our personal finances. He'd signed documents without reading them, trusted me completely, never imagining that his quiet, submissive wife was systematically ensuring she'd survive his inevitable betrayal. And his company? Morrison Design Collective had taken out massive loans in anticipation of the Apex contract. Loans that were personally guaranteed by Richard. Without that $800 million, those loans would default, the firm would collapse, and Richard would be personally liable for millions. I know what you're thinking. Was I being too harsh? Should I have just divorced him quietly and moved on with my life? But here's the thing about betrayal. It's not just about the affair. It's about the 1,000 little moments of disrespect. The dismissive comments. The way he'd talk over me at dinner parties. The jokes about how I didn't understand business. The years of making me feel small so he could feel big. The affair was just the symptom. The disease was his fundamental belief that I was less than him. That I existed to serve him. That my intelligence and worth were measured by how well I supported his dreams while abandoning my own. So no, I wasn't being too harsh. I was being exactly as calculated as he'd taught me to be. The next morning, I woke up to my phone ringing. Richard. I let it go to voicemail. He called 17 more times. On the 18th call, I finally answered, Stephanie. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been crying or screaming or both. Please. We need to talk. I don't think we do, I said calmly, pouring my coffee. The banks are calling in the loans. The investors are pulling out. My partners are threatening to sue me. You have to call off Apex. You have to reinstate the contract. No, I said simply. No? His voice cracked. Stephanie, I'll lose everything. Don't you understand? Everything. I took a sip of my coffee. It was perfect. Exactly how I liked it. Richard had never remembered how I took my coffee. Even after 15 years of marriage. You already lost everything, Richard. You just didn't know it yet. I'm sorry, he burst out, okay? I'm sorry about Jessica. I'm sorry about last night. I'm sorry about all of it. Please. I'm begging you. Don't destroy me like this. I'm not destroying you, I said quietly. You destroyed yourself. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences. There was a long silence. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, I never meant to hurt you. That almost made me laugh. You didn't mean to hurt me? You had an affair for 3 years, Richard. You humiliated me in front of hundreds of people. You threw wine in my face and called me a leech. Which part of that wasn't meant to hurt me? I was angry. I was scared. The contract falling through was entirely your own fault. I interrupted. You want to know the truth? Apex Holdings was prepared to sign that contract. Everything was in order. But then I saw you with Jessica in the garden. Watched you kiss her on the night that was supposed to be your triumph. And I realized something. You were never going to change. You were going to take Apex's money, become even more successful, and leave me anyway. So I decided to leave first. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. processing this information. The contract was real, he finally said. It was all real. Until you proved you hadn't changed. Until you showed me, one last time, exactly who you are. Stephanie, please. I love you. Now I did laugh, sharp and bitter. No, Richard. You love what I gave you. You love the stability, the social connections, the image of having a beautiful wife on your arm. But you've never loved me. If you had, you wouldn't have been able to do any of this. That's not true. Goodbye, Richard. My lawyer will be in touch. I hung up before he could respond and blocked his number. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched from a distance as Richard's world continued to crumble. His firm declared bankruptcy. His partners sued him personally. The banks foreclosed on his company's assets. Jessica left him. Of course, turns out she was more interested in successful, wealthy Richard than broken, desperate Richard. The media had a field day. Wine-throwing CEO's secret. His wife owned everything was one headline. The quiet revenge of Stephanie Morrison was another. I declined all interview requests. I didn't need to tell my story publicly. The facts spoke for themselves. My phone rang one evening. It was Richard's mother, Linda Morrison, a woman who'd never particularly liked me but had always been too polite to show it openly. Stephanie, she said, her voice tight. I hope you're proud of yourself. Actually, Linda, I am. You've destroyed my son. Your son destroyed himself, I corrected. I just stopped enabling him. He made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. He made thousands of mistakes, I said. Every time he lied to me. Every time he slept with his mistress. Every time he dismissed me or belittled me or treated me like I was nothing. Those weren't mistakes, Linda. That was a choice. She was quiet for a moment. Then, he's moved back in with us. He has nothing. No job, no money, no prospects. That's unfortunate, I said, meaning it. I hadn't wanted Richard to suffer forever. I just wanted him to understand what it felt like to lose everything. The way I'd almost lost myself in our marriage. Is there anything he can do? Linda asked. And I heard something in her voice I'd never heard before. Respect. Maybe even a grudging admiration. Any way to make this right. He can sign the divorce papers without contest. He can accept the settlement I'm offering, which is more generous than he deserves. And then he can move on with his life and leave me to live mine. And if he doesn't, then my lawyer releases the full documentation of his affair to the press. And every company in this industry will know exactly what kind of man Richard Morrison is. His reputation, which is the only thing he has left, will be completely destroyed. Linda Morrison sighed. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I've had 3 years to plan, Linda. Yes, I've thought of everything. She hung up without saying goodbye. 2 days later, Richard signed the divorce papers. The settlement gave him enough to start over a small apartment, some seed money for a new venture if he wanted it, and his dignity, assuming he had any left. In return, he relinquished all claims to our shared assets and agreed to a confidentiality clause that prevented him from speaking publicly about our marriage. I kept everything else. The house, the investments, Apex Holdings, and all the companies I'd built in secret over the past 5 years. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I stood in the same ballroom where Richard had thrown wine in my face. But this time, I was the one on stage. Apex Holdings was being recognized as one of the fastest-growing development companies in the country, and I was accepting an award for business leadership. The crowd applauded as I took the microphone, and I looked out at the sea of faces, some I recognized from that terrible night, others new to my story. Thank you, I said, my voice steady and strong. When I started this company 5 years ago, I had a very specific vision: to create a business that valued integrity, respected its partners, and understood that true success isn't measured just in dollars, but in how we treat the people around us. I paused, letting my words sink in. I also wanted to prove something to myself, that I was capable, that I was strong, that I didn't need anyone to validate my worth. Building Apex Holdings taught me that the quiet ones, the underestimated ones, the ones people dismiss as just wives or just mothers, or just support staff, were often the most powerful people in the room. We just don't feel the need to announce it. The applause was louder this time, and I saw several women in the audience nodding, their eyes bright with recognition. After the ceremony, I drove home to my house, no longer haunted by memories of Richard, but filled with my own presence, my own choices, my own future. I poured myself a glass of red wine, ironic, I know, and stood on my terrace, looking out at the city lights. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You were right. I destroyed myself. I just wish I'd realized it before I lost you. I read it twice, then deleted it without responding. There was nothing left to say. Some people might think my revenge was excessive, that I should have just walked away, taken half in a divorce, and moved on. But those people don't understand what it's like to be slowly erased by someone who promised to love you. To watch yourself disappear piece by piece, accommodating and supporting and shrinking until you barely recognize your own reflection. Richard didn't just betray me with his affair. He betrayed me every day by treating me like I was less than him. Like my intelligence and ambitions and worth were somehow inferior to his. So I didn't just want to leave him. I wanted him to understand, viscerally and completely, what it felt like to be powerless, to be dismissed, to be nothing. And now he knew. I'm not proud of what I did, exactly. But I'm not ashamed either. I'm just free. Free to build my own empire, to make my own choices, to live my own life without someone constantly telling me I'm not enough. And you want to know the best part? Jessica reached out to me last month. Apparently, Richard had been seeing another woman behind her back even while they were together. She wanted to apologize, to tell me she understood now what he was capable of. I didn't respond. She'd have to learn her own lessons. As for me, I'm dating again. Casually, carefully. I'm not ready for anything serious. And honestly, I might never be. But I've learned that I don't need someone to complete me. I'm already complete. I built an empire in the shadows, while everyone underestimated me. I planned the perfect revenge while playing the role of dutiful wife. I survived betrayal, humiliation, and the death of everything I thought my life would be. And I came out the other side stronger, wealthier, and more powerful than the man who thought he could dismiss me. So to anyone watching this who's ever been underestimated, who's ever been told they're not enough, who's ever had someone pour wine on their dreams and call them worthless, remember this story. Remember that quiet doesn't mean weak, patient doesn't mean passive, and the person everyone overlooks might just be the most dangerous person in the room. They just won't know it until it's too late. That's my story. The night my husband poured wine on me and discovered I owned the company that controlled his fate. The sweetest revenge I could have ever imagined. Was it worth it? Every single second. Now, if you've made it this far, I want to hear from you. Do you think I went too far? Should I have given Richard a second chance? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a big way? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I've got plenty more stories about betrayal, revenge, and finding your power when everyone counts you out. Until next time, remember, never underestimate the quiet ones. We're the ones planning 10 steps ahead while you're still celebrating step 1. This is Stephanie, reminding you that revenge is a dish best served by someone everyone underestimated. Thanks for watching.